What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And the New York Giants have a roster full of some unproven talents. But who is on this roster that maybe doesn't get the spotlight enough? That's what we want to discuss in today's episode and go over three players that we think are pretty underrated for the New York Giants. I mean, we hear a lot of conversations about how the Giants are lacking talent, have holes all over their roster, but who do they have on the roster that maybe just isn't getting enough recognition? That's who we want to discuss in today's episode. Talk about these three guys that we think deserve a little bit more of the spotlight and a little bit more credit for how good of players they truly are. But before we dive into all that, make sure to leave a like if you enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. Comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And I want to discuss Bobby Okereke first. He was named the Giants' most underrated player by Pro Football Focus in a recent article, and I also do agree with them. He is the Giants' most underrated player, probably, although there's somebody else on the list that we'll get into in a little while. But Okereke, how did he not make the Pro Bowl last year, let alone an All-Pro team? I really think that he should have been on one. Didn't miss a snap, 151 combined tackles. Absolute stud. How are you feeling about Okereke going into 2024?
Well, Bobby Okereke is one of my favorite players on this team, and we called this when we interviewed him last year. This dude was going to be an impact player for us, and first couple games, getting his legs kind of moving, getting his sea legs under him, and he started to kind of just get exponentially better very, very quickly, and that's what we hoped for a lot of Giants players, and unfortunately, we didn't get that same result for everybody. But Bobby Okereke, in the middle of a season that was plagued by adversity, plagued by injury, plagued by negative narratives, he stepped in and put on a show at 27 years old. 4 years, $40 million. Talk about a good contract. Talk about Joe Schoen finding value. Coming from the Indianapolis Colts, obviously, great dude. Like, just a great guy. If you watched our interview last year, you'll know all about him. The dude is just, not only is he a leader, but he is just so humble for how good he is. And he had a pinky injury. He had, injuries all over his body, and he played every single week, showed up every single day, and put together what was probably his best professional season. 7.7% missed tackle rate, the lowest in his career, 105 tackles, 3 consecutive years with over 100 tackles, and he had 5 pass breakups too. He was really solid in coverage. He gave up the lowest amount of yards since 2019's rookie season, but he played less than half of the amount of snaps he played in 2023 that year. He gave up only 301 yards this past year over 1,128 snaps, including 526 snaps in coverage. So altogether, this was his best season. It wasn't even close. He had 20 pressures, another career high, 3 sacks, career high. He was all over the football field for us, and he made our defense go. Like, aside from Dexter Lawrence, he made us at least compete. Like, he was one of the reasons that we stayed in games at times. And big credit to Bobby Okereke. We haven't had a linebacker of this magnitude since Antonio Pierce. You could look at Blake Martinez. He had one really good season, but he was awful in coverage. Okereke is far better, not to mention equally as good as a run stopper and can shoot the gap and, rush the passer on occasion as well. Really, really smart player, high football IQ, leader, rallies the troops. He's everything you want in a linebacker. Every single thing. He checks all the boxes. This is a player that on a really good team, he'd be a primary starter. And the Giants are a really bad team, and he's one of their best players, and he shows up every single day. You love to see great players perform on bad teams because it means they don't give up. They don't fall into the traps of we stink. We don't want to win football games. He showed up every single week. He led by example. Great guy. I can't say enough good things about him, Anthony. This is one of the most underrated. I know people actually think the world of him, and I think that people are actually underrating how good he actually was for us at times. I think that he's going to run back another great season for us, especially with some more pass rush support, and hopefully a better offense. Gets to rest a little bit more, stay off the field, which inevitably will keep him healthier. So I think, in my opinion at least, he's underrated by the general consensus. But among Giants fans, I think we all kind of look at him as one of our better players on this roster.
Yeah, Okereke is definitely among the best players on the New York Giants roster. I mean, just looking at some of these stats, I think it's really fascinating because when you look at his career, he had those 4 seasons with the Indianapolis Colts, and he was always a very good player, putting up 132 combined tackles in 21, 151 in 2022. Then this past year, 149 combined tackles, but major improvements in productivity and efficiency in some other areas. 11 tackles for loss was a career high. He had 6 quarterback hits in 2023. He had 0 the year prior. He had 2.5 sacks compared to 0 sacks the year prior this past season. He had 4 forced fumbles, another career high, and 10 pass defenses. He had 10 pass breakups. Like, that's a pretty incredible number for a linebacker. That's like there's a lot of cornerbacks, good cornerbacks, that don't put up 10 pass breakups. And then, of course, the 2 interceptions, 62 yards in return. So I don't know, man. Bobby Okereke really stuffed the stat sheet last year. And thinking over the last 10 years in terms of free agency signings that the New York Giants have made, I think instant impact, Bobby Okereke has probably had the best out of any of them. And he stacks up there with one of the best free agency signings that the Giants have made in the last decade. Now, some other names that do come to mind: Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, Janoris Jenkins, Snacks Harrison. Giants had a really good offseason when they signed those 3 guys. Those were some great pickups by them. But outside of them, I think it's Bobby Okereke. Definitely in the post-Gettleman era, Bobby Okereke has been the Giants' best offseason acquisition thus far, although we'll see how Brian Burns, of course, performs soon enough. And Malik Neighbors, though he's not a free agency signing, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, man, just incredible value out of Bobby Okereke 1 year into his tenure with the New York Giants, and we still got 3 years left on that contract. So loving it. Love what Bobby Okereke is bringing to the team. He just responded to us on Instagram, sent us an emoji. Cool guy, my best friend. I love Bobby Okereke. But let's move on to the next guy that we want to talk about, Alex. That's Devin Singletary, the running back for the New York Giants. I know you wrote an article recently, have some very cool stats about him. When you look at the way that he played last year, I think a lot of people are writing him off as this replacement level running back, like he's not that special. I disagree. He's well above replacement level. Devin Singletary is a very good starting running back. I think he proved that last year. I think he needs more of a workload with the New York Giants this year, but I mean, the guy's really good, and I think maybe some people are writing him off as this massive downgrade from Saquon Barkley. Well, of course, yes, it's probably a downgrade because Saquon has those big highlight plays and is considered one of the best running backs in the NFL by most players and coaches and whatever. But Singletary is not that far down the list. Like, he is a very good player. So, Alex, talk about Devin Singletary and why you're so excited about him this season.
Look, guys, you know my take on Devin Singletary. We spoke about this a couple days ago, and the running back kind of by committee approach the Giants are seemingly going to go in with Tyrone Tracy. You know, obviously you have Eric Gray in the conversation as well. But Singletary is a very, very solid player. He is a starting running back at the NFL level, and at $5.5 million per season, he is a third of the cost of Saquon Barkley. The Giants are going to get really good value out of him. Now, you know, you look at the Texans' offensive line compared to the Giants. The Giants were the 30th ranked run blocking line, according to PFF at least, and then the Texans were the 20th. So both of them below average. Obviously, the Houston Texans a little bit better. And they had very similar stats, Singletary and Saquon Barkley. Singletary ran for 986 yards, had 5 touchdowns, 1 fumble. So he's been, you know, throughout his career, pretty good with the football. He had one season in 2021 where he had 5 fumbles. But aside from that, he's been pretty good with the football in his hands. You know, looking at his yards after contact, 2.88 yards after contact. I think Saquon was at 2.91. So you're seeing like he generates the same amount of production after contact that Saquon does for the most part. He had 686 of his 986 yards came after contact. So he is very used to getting hit and still churning out those extra yards, falling forward for first downs. He had 26 rushes for 10 plus yards and 44 first downs picked up. So, you know, looking at the way that he runs, they call him the motor for a reason. Like, he actually fits this scheme really well in terms of Carmen Bracillo's system that kind of get through the gaps, explode north-south. Devin Singletary is the type of guy that he's not going to juke 40 times, go lateral, find his way outside. He's going to take one juke right upfield, and he's going to run with as much power as he has. And he's going to turn out extra yards. You're going to see him fall forward for a lot of first downs next year. I like Devin Singletary a lot. Now, where you run into problems with him is kind of the passing game. You know, he's not the best receiver in the world. Last year, he had 245 yards, so he wasn't terrible by any means. He had 273 yards after catch, and you know, I think you know, you kind of look at what happened. He had a couple that were behind the line of scrimmage. He had a receiving kind of, I guess, game, a long reception of 41 yards. So I like what I see from a guy like this. I think that he's a very, very solid player. I think that he can offer you a lot of value, especially on the ground game early on in downs. I love to see Tyrone Tracy support as a third down back and kind of change a pace option, even a kick returner. You know, it's another conversation for another day. But Devin Singletary, a lot of people are kind of looking at this as like, wow, we lost Saquon Barkley. Like, now we're going to have Devin Singletary. You guys are going to probably realize that, wow, like we didn't actually lose that much of a step in the running game because our offensive line is going to get better. So we're going to get equal to more production from the running game, most likely. We pray, we hope. I'm not going to guarantee it because I have to see it for myself before I say I can, tangibly or probably sit here and like actually convince myself that it's going to be better. But Devin Singletary is going to provide probably similar stats to what Saquon Barkley did for us last season at a third of the cost. And by all accounts, that's tremendous value. That's great value, in fact, because you take that money, you allocate it towards offensive linemen, towards Brian Burns, towards whoever other free agents we have. So, in that sense, I do think that this is a really good free agent signing for the Giants. I think it's very, very good value. And the Giants know Devin Singletary, right? He's a former Buffalo Bill. He's worked with Brian Daboll before. So keep that in mind. He knows how to use him. He knows how to scheme him into good situations. And I think that will be a very good kind of marriage where we'll get even more value from that combination.
100%. And another important stat to note, he hasn't fumbled the ball in 2 years. I think that's a great thing to note about Devin Singletary. Very careful with the football. Doesn't put the ball into harm's way. 5'7", 203 pounds, smaller guy out of FAU. I think it's always fun watching those 5'7" running backs. They make me feel like I could be a pro athlete if I really wanted to be, or if things shaped out differently for me in my life. So shout out to Devin Singletary putting on for the short kings out here. But a great runner and decent in pass pro. I think that's also something that you got to keep in mind with how bad the Giants' pass protection has been. Singletary can get up there. You could go online and find some clips of him making some key blocks here and there. He's not super consistent, but he does have his moments in pass pro. And again, doesn't put the ball in harm's way. I think he's a decent receiver. I think he can be your lead back in this offense and play at a very high level. Like you said, familiarity with the New York Giants, formerly of the Buffalo Bills, so knows Brian Daboll, knows Joe Shane, knows all those guys, and I do think that Devin Singletary is going to surprise some people as a very solid running back for the Giants this year. He didn't go for 1,000 rushing yards last year for Houston, but you also have to keep in mind, I think it was the first 4 weeks of the season, I want to say, he wasn't the starting running back. Who was it? That was Damian Pierce, I think it was their starting running back, and then Singletary took over. And then he didn't give the job back because he was so good. So that's something that I also think you need to keep in mind with Singletary. And considering his production last year after he took the starting job, now he's going to have the starting job from week 1 onward. He could go for 1,000 rushing yards this year, which would be very nice because that was something that surprised me last year. We didn't have a 1,000-yard rusher with Saquon Barkley. I'm hoping that we get one this year with Devin Singletary, and I think that would be rather exciting proposition for the New York Giants offense. But moving on from running back, Alex, let's talk wide receiver. Now, this is a guy who I have always been very high on and I've praised endlessly for the New York Giants. Darius Slayton, to me, is arguably the most underrated wide receiver in the NFL. This is a guy that just does not get credit for the consistent output that he produces on the football field. The way that he plays at a high level every single season. Now, I'm not saying that he's an elite WR1, a primary receiving threat in any offense, but he's had to be the Giants' primary receiving threat in recent years, even when they've brought in other talents like Galladay, like Waller. No matter who they bring in, somehow, some way, Darius Slayton always ends up outperforming them in one way or another and playing at a very high level. He puts up touchdowns. He puts up at least 700 yards. I know that a lot of Giants fans are going to say, hey, but he drops everything. No, he doesn't. He used to drop a lot of passes. He doesn't drop that many passes anymore. Darius Slayton did a lot of work last offseason to fix his hands, and it showed up on the football field. He was much better at catching the football and didn't have those, oh my God, what are you doing kind of plays anymore. Like, he really got rid of those bad plays and just played at a very high level. He's a receiver who can make contested catches, can add yards after the catch. I forget what his average yards after the catch per reception is, but I know that it was in the upper half of the NFL last season. Guy just finds a way to make plays and always is on the football field. Like, he's been banged up before. He's dealt with injuries. He's played through a lot of injuries. Like, Darius Slayton is just one of those guys. He's a gamer. He's a New York Giant through and through. Like, he bleeds blue, and he loves to get on that football field and make plays. He's underrated as heck to me. He's super underpaid, only making $6 million on an average annual salary. He's looking for that new contract to increase that salary, of course, and I think that he's going to get that raise. I think he deserves it absolutely, because $6 million per year for a guy who's more productive than Gabe Davis, who makes $14 million per year. The Giants are on a bargain deal with Darius Slayton, and him holding out for a new deal is totally respectable in my opinion, and I do believe that he's one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL. If you're looking at his contract, you're looking at it relative to other guys in the league, you can't tell me that Slayton hasn't been more productive and more consistent than a guy like Gabe Davis throughout the past few years, and that's not even including the fact that the offensive line has been terrible for the Giants. The quarterback position has dealt with a lot of injuries and inconsistencies. The offensive coordinators have been terrible for the Giants for a few years there. Obviously things are a little bit better now under the Daboll regime, but when it was Joe Judge and Jason Garrett and Freddie Kitchens, you still had Darius Slayton going out there for 700 yards and making plays. So I just think no matter what adversity this guy faces, he finds a way to put up 700 yards somehow. And that makes him a really valuable number 2 wide receiver, a really good one too. So now with Malik Nabers in the offense as that primary receiving threat, I think that takes a little bit of the load off of Slayton's shoulders and allows him to play at an even higher level. And I think that final stretch of the season, Alex, when Tyrod Taylor is throwing the ball downfield and just giving him deep shots, had the deep touchdown against the Rams, the deep one against the Eagles, I think we saw a glimpse of maybe we haven't been using Darius Slayton properly. Maybe there is a little bit more to unlock here, and he could be putting up 1,000 receiving yards if we were using him properly. So yeah, man, I think that Darius Slayton is one of the most underrated players in the NFL. Maybe the most underrated player on the New York Giants outside of Bobby Okereke. I know I made that argument for him earlier, but the more I talk about Slayton, man, the more excited I get about how great he's been for us for the last 5 years. So big fan of Darius Slayton. Alex, how are you feeling about him? Why do you think he is also an underrated talent?
I mean, when you look at Darius Slayton and his sample size, you look at the production he's had, there are a couple of passes I can literally relive in my head. There's a 65-yard catch that Daniel Jones overthrew him on that should have been an easy layup. There are stats, there are numbers here that were left on the table because of bad quarterback performance. There are a lot of production that, bad offensive line performance that if you erase those things, Darius Slayton's numbers look a lot better than they even do now. He can be a WR2. In fact, put him on the Chiefs, I guarantee you this dude's having the best season of his career and it's not even close. You know what I mean? He would be, for some reason, I just see if the Giants are having a really bad year again, I could see the Giants trading him to the Chiefs, just because I know they got who they get, Xavier Worthy, and they have Rashee Rice, and Rashee Rice is obviously going through some stuff right now, to say the very least. So we'll see what happens with him. But if the Giants are looking like they're not doing so well and they want to trade somebody at the deadline, I could see Slayton being moved to a team like the Chiefs, and I think he'd be excellent there for what it's worth. Very solid player. I get why he wants more money. I think he's better than Gabe Davis. I think that he deserves it. He's earned it. He took a major pay cut to stay with the Giants and compete. And even though another team, he might have been a primary guy. I do respect Darius Slayton. I think that he's a good dude. I think that he's been here for a long time. He never complains. He never comes out and says any bad stuff. I think that he shows up every day. He works hard. He produces when the ball's thrown to him. And I think that he's going to get some more targets this year because there won't be as much attention. And, Malik Nabers will be commanding a lot more. There'll be a lot more time for, Daniel Jones or Drew Lock, whoever's playing quarterback in the pocket to stand there and deliver. And Slayton, when given time, creates separation. You know what I mean? He gets downfield. He's a good backside dig guy. He's a good crossing route guy. He can run those routes. And I think that ultimately you give him some time to get open, and they'll find him open on the other side of the football field somewhere. So Giants will be a little bit more proactive getting the football, I do believe. Malik Nabers commanding so much safety attention will open up the entire side of the opposite side of the field for a guy like Darius Slayton and Jalen Hyatt for what it's worth. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that Slayton is very much underrated because a lot of the cons to his game have not been his fault. You know what I mean? The drops, yeah, but he's eliminated a lot of those problems. So a lot of the problems are offensive line, quarterback, just not having enough weapons. There are things outside of his control impacting his production. And when you have those things and you consider them, it makes you an underrated player because in another team, in a better situation, you're probably producing a lot more. He'd be great on the Bills. He'd be great on the Chiefs. He'd be better on teams that have a lot better situations than us. But maybe the Giants can finally get that high-end WR2 value out of him this upcoming season. Still young, still got his speed, still got his qualities, and I think he's only getting better. So yeah, I'm in alignment with you there. I do think he's underrated. I do think that he deserves more money. I just don't know if the Giants are going to be willing to give him the contract he wants. I think a fair deal makes sense, but we'll see what that looks like when the time comes.
Yeah, and ultimately it's going to come down to how the team is playing midway through the year. Like you mentioned, this will definitely be a player who gets brought up as a potential trade deadline candidate because Slayton, yes, a great player for the Giants, but if they're not winning a lot of games and they need to start recouping some draft capital for the following season, they're going to give Jalen Hyatt a higher workload. They're going to put him on the field, and they're probably going to move on from Darius Slayton at the deadline, take an extra pick. That's totally possible. But if he continues to play well this season, and then they move on from him, maybe he boosts his value, and the Giants get a little bit of a higher pick for him. But right now, I don't think there's any point in trading him. He's a really good player. The Giants need some talent on the field this year. Give Jalen Hyatt even more time to develop. It doesn't hurt. But yeah, I guess we'll see where the season's going. Maybe he does end up getting traded down the line. I hope not, though. Really like Slayton. Hope he sticks around and is a Giant for life. But once a Giant, always a Giant. A couple more stats on him, though, that I think are really exciting. Yards after catch per reception. Like I said, it was up in the upper half. He actually ranked 10th in the NFL at 6 yards after the catch per reception. So he was ahead of guys like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, T. Higgins, DK Metcalf, Jamar Chase. He's ahead of all of these guys in yards after the catch per reception, and he had 3 drops. So if you're still trying to say that his 5.7% drop rate, his 3 drops are a problem, I think you're not looking around the NFL and seeing that that is a very good number. 3 drops compared to Deebo Samuel had 4, Rashee Rice had 3, Nico Collins had 3, Puka Nacua had 13, which is crazy. I didn't realize he had that many drops. George Pickens with 3, Jerry Jeudy with 4, Jalen Waddle with 7, DJ Moore had 2, Amon-Ra St. Brown had 5, Tyreek Hill had 10. Three drops in a season is a very good number. Darius Slayton does not have a drops problem. I just hate that narrative. I hate when people bring that up and say he can't catch the ball. He catches the ball. Yeah, he had some drops early in his career, but you're talking 4 years ago now. Like, he has developed. He is one of the players. We talk about this a lot recently, Alex, how the Giants aren't developing their guys. Slayton is one of those guys who they have developed, and to his own credit, he's seeked a lot of outside help and done a lot of training with wide receiver coaches outside of the Giants organization. He's put a lot of the development on his own shoulders and really helped himself play better throughout his career. So you do have to give Slayton credit. He's been a grinder. He's just found ways to improve himself every single year. And again, one of my favorite players on the Giants right now, super underrated. Drops problem, it's not really that much of a problem anymore. 12 missed tackles forced last year as well. Just a damn good player to me. Just a guy who shows up week in and week out. And I'm excited to see him play again this season. I think that he can be even better, like you said, Alex, with Malik Neighbors commanding so much attention from secondary. So it's going to be exciting. I think all 3 of these guys are going to have good years. Hopefully they all stay healthy, and hopefully the Giants can exceed our expectations. We're not too high on them right now because it's been a rough few years for us. And we kind of have seen this story before. We get a little bit of excitement, then we get disappointed. Try not to get disappointed because we're trying not to get too excited. But hopefully it is an exciting year for the Giants, and they do exceed our expectations. Maybe these 3 guys will be a big part of that. And of course, we're going to continue to talk about these guys and all the other guys on the New York Giants and all the news surrounding the New York Giants right here on Fireside Giants. So make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you listen to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.